charter. So he set up a website, but he's still.
Where is he live?
He's in Seattle.
So he's up by the San Juan Island.
Yeah, that's what he wanted to do. There's a lot of people that charter boats over there.
Okay, we're live again. We're gonna reconvene and Cynthia is with us this morning, and Patrick Murphy also. So go right ahead.
Okay, great. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put up on the share screen the draft amendment that we're walking through. It's draft 1.1 dated April 6th. That should be 63 pages. And I think Mike has made it so that you all have copies of it.
So we've closed out some sections.
No, okay. This one right here. All right.
And in the email that I sent you on, it would have been April 6th. And then I included it in my email yesterday that I sent you yesterday. I have a list of what are the open sections. So when we get to a section, I'll mention if it's one that I have that you've closed out or not.
So where do we start from, Cynthia?
We should start with section 1 on page 1.
Okay, right there. All right.
I also texted Chris just to let him know that we were doing the walkthrough, since some of it just has to do with the money and.
So we're taking 479 as passed.
We gotta do.
We've got to.
Draft 1.1.
It should be on here.
I think it's.
It should be 63 pages.
63, yeah.
Okay, so the first thing that you'll see is technical corrections has been made plural. I'm gonna make that change on line 11 as well. The reason why technical corrections has been made plural is if you get to page 3, you'll see that there is now a new technical correction that needed to be made in the transportation program for aviation. There was a number that was wrong. You will also see in draft 2.1 that there are 2 rail projects that needed to be removed from the white book. They were inadvertently included in the more detailed description, not the overall summary. Chris caught this when we were working on section 2, which is the summary section for the bill. So these are being included in this version in section 1C, not a change that the General Assembly is making to what has been proposed by the administration. It's just the administration realizing there were some typos in the white book. It's easier to correct it here as opposed to replacing pages with everyone in the building and over in the Secretary of State's office because of the official copy that's been filed over there. But aside from that, I think you have section 1 closed out, except for the fact that it adopts the whole white book. So it's sort of like the last thing that you finalize.
All right, so we agree to this. I mean, it just seems like it's cleaning up some.
It's just correcting
Oh, now it's our summary.
your summary section. So a lot of yellow. You will be seeing some
I know
changes.
Tim Ash is watching because he's putting it back in.
The 5th year that it has been included in the bill, and the 5th year that the Senate has added it, the House has not taken your lead. So there, a lot of this is just template from prior years, filling things in. I'll just highlight for you some of the pieces that are sort of new to this iteration of the T-bill. Section 5, I know this is an outstanding issue. This is the Rail Trail Community Connectivity Grants. It's highlighted in green to track for me. I know that that's something that you got more information from the agency on. In terms of the public transit program, I have the number highlighted in green just because I don't think you fully closed out what's happening with the $1 million to Green Mountain Transit. And there is more here in terms of what public transit is covering. I included the Recovery and Job Access Program, Elders and Persons with Disabilities, and the Vermont Kidney Association grant. You'll then have in sections 9, 10, and 11. You have not seen these sections yet. There are proposals that have come from Green Mountain Transit and the Agency of Transportation. But section 9 addresses the fact that Green Mountain Transit is going to be developing the plan to establish tiered fare service. Section 10 has to do with the recommendation for 1 or more funding sources for the non-federal match for of public transit providers. And then section 11, this is the graded service model. I might have gotten that wrong. That's the additional report that you're gonna be getting back from the Agency of Transportation. So these are not typically things that are included in the summary section, because this is summarizing something that's more unique to this T-bill, and that's language that you'll see shortly. And then for purposes of the vehicle incentive programs,
So we're still in section 2. Why do we have the kidney grant, section?
that's just summarizing something that's in the white book that you wouldn't see otherwise. Historically, there's just been some more to the public transit summary piece that reflects what's been included in the white book. You certainly don't need to include it. You don't need
in the past.
in the past, you've included the dialysis piece.
Because I mean, if section 2 is as titled, they include, say, Vermont households money, so that could be it. I always thought of it just as, about reducing fossil fuels, vehicle miles traveled, things like that. So I don't want section 2 just to become an entire rehash of the entire bill.
Yeah.
So
You certainly could take out and on page 7, you could take out Romanet 3, 4, 5 has historically been included, but you could take it out. I think what you do want to include, probably just for this year, is the splitting of the Go Vermont and the MTI piece, since that is something that's being done in the bill, to highlight it in the summary section. But again, that is completely up to you. Section 2 doesn't need to be here, and it can include sort of whatever you want to summarize.
The purpose of this wasn't necessary to highlight, be the highlight of the bill. It was really to say what are our investments really to support climate change and carbon reduction.
put them in one section because they were
Yeah.
spread out.
And
And
those,
so
and Go Vermont and MTI are that.
I understand. So, but the fact that we're splitting them out, I don't think makes any difference here. It's just what are we spending for?
Totally fair. I will restate what I said in that those are 2 big components of the public transit budget that are geared towards trying to reduce vehicle miles traveled.
I mean,
Yeah.
I just don't think whether that we split them out or not is a highlight, but maybe it is. To me, this is to say, out of this bill, X millions of dollars have been directed toward those very projects that reduce the carbon footprint generated by the transportation sector, which is the largest sector. So
then I think you do want to delete lines, page 7, line 16, to page 8, line 5. Question outstanding for whether or not you want to keep.
I would even delete the rest
Go
of
Vermont
those,
and MTI.
section 9, 10. Where are you seeing the Go Vermont and MTI?
So
MTI is on
Page
page
7.
7.
page 7, line 7 to 10, and 11 to 15. So do you also want to delete the summaries of, or the blurbs about sections 9, 10, and 11?
I do.
Okay.
Unless there's somebody that disagrees. I think anything that isn't just like an actual investment in the project, they're all in the bill and we're already doing them. We can cover them when we do the section by section. If it's a big thing, it's worth mentioning.
So then do you want to keep MTI and Go Vermont, or do you want to delete them as well? So that would be page 7, lines 7 to 15.
Well, they're all under public transit.
So I mean, it sounds like, so you're going to delete B, C, and D, which means that public transit subsection A will get deleted. So do you want the public transit program summary thing to say, this act provides for a fiscal year expenditure of a number to be determined for public transit uses throughout the state, period? And, or do you want it to then say included in the authorization are, and then include what's on line 7 to 15? You've already decided that you're striking in this subdivision 4, line 16 to the end.
Okay, 7 through 15, but I could go either way on that.
State of Vermont, Garfield Building says 21 hybrid electric vehicles, 13 battery electric vehicles,
Yeah.
state fleet. Wow, that's good.
Isn't it good we have section 2? You can learn these things.
Okay, so public
Well,
transit
let's keep section 7, let's keep.
for
Roman
A,
at 1 and 2.
1 and 2, but they'll shift.
And there.
Yep.
Rail program, renumbered.
Yep.
That might take a whole page out of it.
Rail safe in, because that, we did actually have it in there, the number of one freight train equals X number of, tractor trailers. I remember that.
Or did that, was that somewhere else? I remember we talked about it.
I think you talked about it. I don't know if it was included. And it, you know what, it might have been included in the first year and
I
then
think
it
it
was
was.
taken out because it was something that the. Michelle, do you remember if that was taken out because it was something that couldn't really be approximated or?
Yeah, that may have been it. It was in there, maybe the first cut.
I think it like my guess is if you have a recollection of it being there, it was there in the first year and then it was intentionally removed in a subsequent year because it was thought that it wasn't
Does it
necessarily
really
accurate.
depend on,
So variable.
yeah, what you're carrying and those things?
So
Yeah.
let me ask, does the heading need to be changed? Because Anne saved Vermont households money. I guess all of it does save money, so let's leave it. I mean,
I can say that that has been there since the beginning.
yeah,
Well,
I guess we'll keep it in because obviously public transit, you don't have to have a car.
Okay. For purposes of the electric vehicle supply equipment section, this is subdivision 7. It's referencing the NEVI plan, the amount of money that's the fiscal year expenditure there, and saying that in addition to monies that were previously appropriate but not yet expended for the electric vehicle supply equipment at multi-unit dwellings, workplaces, and public venues and attractions. So this is slightly different from the template text you've used in the past.
how much would we say estimate that's has been previously appropriated but not expended? Is it like a little bit or like million?
6.25 million.
I mean, that's been appropriated prior years, that's been,
2 million ARPA funds and 4.25.
and those are like contracts that are out, waiting for like construction season to get built and things like that.
They're not out yet because the guidance didn't come until just last month, but they're going out this, springtime.
In addition to the 7 million that we have new money.
Yep.
Do you think you're gonna spend 7 million this year?
We'd hope to, yeah. No, obligated not to spend it.
Right, let's just get it obligated, but they might not get it obligated at construction.
That bucket is not likely you're not likely to see that in this construction season. Yeah.
Well, they lost like the big advantage of bike country bike this year. They had the companies all over the place. You could
Yeah.
like drive it up. But they went out. It was a while
So
ago.
if it ever-
No, unless they got a new contract, that was it. That was, I thought that was used a lot, it was longer. Like, but
In
not
New York City,
not
you
enough.
see a lot.
Yeah, not enough, I guess.
DC, they're all over the place.
Hey, probably. Okay, yeah.
Okay, so subdivision 8, this is on your vehicle incentive programs, and the expansion of the plug-in electric vehicle market. So subdivision A is now talking about the fact that you're codifying the
I don't think
program.
that needs to be there.
Okay.
I think the money, the fact that we're putting it from section law into
Yeah.
code, I don't think we need to be quite that descriptive. We just wanna have a sense of the investments, the amount of money.
They do this for years, why we be micromanaging the whole system.
Well, this
This
is really
is
the summary
summary.
to give a sense of what we have for investments for carbon reduction. And so I think this is technical, just.
Do you agree, Michelle?
Agreed. Okay,
What section is that?
so this is gonna be subdivision
Bottom of
8.
page 9, 8, it says it codifies, et cetera. I don't think we need that language. No, page 9.
So I think then what you want to do is, it'll say vehicle incentive programs and expansion of the PEV market as the subdivision heading. You'll then strike in subdivision A where it says codification programs, and instead start with the sentence that says no additional monies are authorized, however, you know, this is what's left.
Right, because we want to have those dollar amounts.
And then for the
Yes, we do.
electrify your fleet program, it'll talk about how you're creating this new program, and then has $500,000. I have, and you'll see this in the language proposal for what's coming from the nonprofit mobility services piece. It'll mention and increased incentives for nonprofit mobility, if you want it to say that.
Yeah.
And then for C, do you really want to say anything about the e-bike incentive program and the changes that are being made there, or do you just want to say
2.
there's $50,000 for it?
I go with just the 2. Yeah, item, double odds. Roman numeral.
Ruminant. Ruminant. Is that what we call
Yeah,
it?
or
Ruminant.
little ruminant, one of the two. Okay, so,
Yeah.
Could you spell that?
okay, so it'll,
Senator Chittenden word? I don't
No, it's not. It's an Anthea word.
no, I learned it from Tucker.
Okay,
Tucker Anderson uses it.
okay.
We does?
Okay, so what you'll have, and you'll see this in draft 2.1, is nothing about the codification, that there are no additional monies being authorized in the act for those 3 programs, but this is what's expected to be available. Creation of the Electrify Your Fleet program with that additional sentence, and that there's $500,000 for that, and that the e-bike incentive program is getting another $50,000. Do you want to keep subdivision 9, which is talking about all of the work that the agency is going to
Maybe
do?
just last sentence.
Or do you want to just say this act provides for fiscal year expenditure of monies
If
under?
you want to know more about it, go to that section.
Do you want to have reference to sections
Yeah.
26 and 27? Okay, so,
They can do it worse.
okay, so it'll just say the subdivision heading, which is on page 11, lines 5, 6, and 7. Strike the part that says sections 26 and 27, et cetera, and just say this act provides for a fiscal year expenditure of 12 million, et cetera.
So Senator Pershing, on the floor, they don't have the word search feature. Do you want the section
No.
reference for any fellow senator wanting?
You'll say you'll get that before 3rd reading.
We can post as a data source.
Do you want to include anything in subdivision 10 on complete streets?
Good boy.
No. There's no money there.
No money.
No changes either, it's just moving it around, right?
There are some changes.
But it's more like we'll put it in when they finish the complete street.
It's really for investments. How much money? Put your money where your mouth
Right, because
is.
this is basically studies and changing how we.
You have it separately?
Yeah, Wilson Road was a big thing.
Okay.
That was 4 lanes down to 2 with the center lane.
Okay.
So subdivision 11 out. Vermont state standards.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to put support for a US Route 5 bicycle corridor?
There's no money.
No money.
We don't want to highlight any studies.
Let's comfort. Probably the contradiction is what we're gonna say, so to take out is easier, right? That's the way that's question.
Yeah,
Right, it'll be in the section by section, but.
yeah, this is just to summarize sort of what the
Right. Make it shorter, it's a little easier.
proposed expenditures are.
And then I'm assuming you also want subdivision 13 out.
Yeah.
Of this section, not necessarily,
Yeah.
not going into that. Okay, so this will make your summary section quite a bit shorter. Okay,
Good.
section 3. This is taking out the one-time appropriations. You didn't close this section out. You were still talking about both of the pieces, and I don't know where you have landed there.
Both of the, what do you mean both?
Both the 3 million for the rail trail community connectivity grants, which was going to be general fund, and the St. Albans District Maintenance Facility, which is going to be 3.5 million from the capital fund operating.
I was prepared, and that's what I thought, we were taking those grants out, we're talking about general fund, and it's on our list to consider with all the other general fund
So we'll
proposals.
take it out of here, or we'll just not say where the money's coming from.
So the,
You might want to, depending on what Michelle tells us, we might want to see which ones could get the match and which ones would fall totally to the general fund, which would reduce that 3 million. So that's what I was thinking, is the ones that can be matched with the dollars would, you know, we would want to keep it, but the proposed appropriation of 3 million would be adjusted for the downward, because we're talking about a smaller amount, and then the balance that would all be state funded would have to be out there with our list of all the other general fund spending priorities when we build the budget.
so then I think what would be happening with section 3
And I did
is,
bring my copy of Michelle's.
Yeah, we have handouts for everybody.
Okay.
so I think what would be happening in section 3 is authorized spending as amended as follows. Instead of, for the grants on page 13, line 2, being 3 million down to 0, change of 3 million, it would be 3 million down to X, change of 3 million less X. And then the sources of funds on line 5 would reflect the same change. And then in subsection B, on lines 11 and 12, the footnote that's in the white book would be changed from 3 million general fund grants to X million general fund grants. So that deals with the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail piece. You're just going to need to know what those numbers should be. And then there's still the question of the St. Albans District Maintenance Facility and whether money is found.
What's
for that.
grants for the rail trail? What do they mean? I thought it was completed.
Yeah, these are for the amenities, for signage, helping connect to community. Sometimes the trail is kind of on the side of a village to connect to the village center, et cetera.
But I could include parking, bathrooms, I could include
Is this continuing every year or is it?
No, it's a one-time.
one time. And then the St. Albans, we're putting it into
We're
the,
gonna, yeah, I think you wanted to put it in.
So it's
But-
included as a project. in
And how we
section
fund
4.
it is going to be, it was proposed, and what we're hoping to do is create this capital fund. We'll be putting money into it and fund the garage through that mechanism. So you'll put the project in, but it would,
do we need to name the fund, like this is capital fund operating? Is that good enough, or do we have to say? what
Well, what
the
I
cash-
get-
That's just the cash.
we may have to do well, like we did last year. Remember when we moved funds around in the transportation that we had to align them in the end,
Yeah, so
two bills.
Okay.
So what you have is just the issue you're dealing with now is if you look in your white book, in the very end of it, it's got this like one-time appropriation tab. So if you in section 1 adopt the white book, except as amended, and you don't amend that sheet of paper, you're saying that there's an authorization of $3.5 million for
But
this
there's no money
project
to
for that.
go with it.
And there isn't necessarily money to go with it. You do have your like caveat language in subsection A of section 1 that says to the extent that federal, state, and local funds are available. But in an ideal world, you want your white book, your T-bill to match your big bill, and in this case, maybe the
What if
capital
you just
bill.
didn't have it in here, what would that happen?
So if you don't include anything about it here, you're adopting what's in there and pointing to Senator Mitchell's white book. And in there is that one piece of paper. So what came out of the House was in essence ripping out the piece of paper. It was deleting, it was either making everything on its zeros or it was deleting all the little explanatory footnotes. So it sounds like for the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail, the plan is to reach some sort of understanding of what that 3 million amount should actually be, and then know that it needs to be found from general fund monies. The question then is, what do you want to do for the St. Albans District Maintenance Facility? Do you want to keep it as stripping it down to the zeros here and then adding it to the book? And if you, in the big bill or the capital bill, find money for it, sort of doing an amendment to the T-bill, then
What's the easiest?
it depends on what you know and when you know in terms of how you're paying for it.
What about the known and unknown?
Well, thank you,
Oh.
Donald Rumsfeld. And there are unknown unknowns, unknown unknowns.
I mean, if you can tell me before you, you know, plan to get the amendment to the Senate Secretary's office, okay, we're gonna have 2 million in capital fund operating and it's gonna be in the capital bill, I can just make this 3.5 million, change it to 2 million. I'm just picking that as an example. But I think you need to do something to change it, because otherwise you know it's gonna be wrong.
You know, what is happening is that all of this used to be all T-fund money. And the minute you start moving other money in, that whole thing about adopting a plan that in fact doesn't have sufficient T-fund money to support is causing this problem.
Yeah.
So that old practice of just adopting it, independent of, in the end, what money's gonna be available, we're getting into the same thing with the capital bill. When it was all bonded, you know, was one thing, but now you're getting into,
It was plug and play.
yeah,
That's all it
and
was.
so it's made these other bills, and for many of them, like, you know, some of the economic development, they don't have a separate bill. We just put the appropriations that we're able to support into the budget. So I don't know how to address this at this point, because we're gonna have to find out how much money we can match. And so what that 3 million would have to look like. Do you have to authorize that federal money in the plan there? I could do it in the budget.
But so it's just that page in the white book that's the problem.
So
And I think maybe what you do is you change the page in the white book to be zeros now, and then the Senate Appropriations is referred the T-bill, and Senate Appropriations can amend this section to have the numbers be what the numbers are supposed to be and have the footnotes say what the footnotes are supposed to say.
Let's do that.
I think that's the easiest thing.
Okay, so that means keep section 3 just as it is, in essence, ripping that page of the white book out. You have the chair of Senate Appropriations and the vice chair.
We can gently remove it. We don't have to.
We don't, right.
Well,
We're-
You will
Right, without
insert a future replacement page in the Senate Appropriations Amendment to the T-bill. So that's your opportunity then to rewrite section 3, but you're still adding the project, the St. Albans District Maintenance Facility, to the white book, so that it's a program that can move forward and have your Senate Appropriations Amendment deal with what the amount is for that. And obviously, Senator Ingalls, that might require some coordination, since the T-bill will not be referred to your committee, in making sure that the Senate Appropriations Amendment reflects whatever's in the capital bill as necessary. I think that's the easiest way to not tie up the T-bill sort of in perpetuity while you wait to figure out the other moving pieces. I don't know if the agency or Bradley would have a different take on that. Okay. So it sounds like section 3, you're closing out, but you know that it's gonna get it.
And section 4 could
You were already good with 4. That's adding it to the book. Okay, section 5, this is your rail trail community connectivity grants. You wanted to add this to the bill sort of as a placeholder, but maybe what you want to do is be a little bit less specific in the language. So say that the following project is added to the program, but be silent on the authorization, and know that if there is an authorization for it, it's going to come from the big bill in the form of general fund, and it'll be reflected in the amendment that Senate Appropriations will make to section 3. And then that would give you your purpose, your eligible projects, and your match language. Okay, so I will delete on page 14 on lines 2 into 3 with an authorization of 3 million in one-time general fund money. So it'll just say project addition, this project is added, what its name is, what purpose, what projects are eligible, and then the match piece. Section 6, I have that you didn't close this out. This has to do with like the swap of the bridge projects in Sheldon, but then it also was the agency's recommendation that in this section be included the cancellation of the Bennington bypass project, and that you were going to reach out to your colleagues from Bennington to see if they had an opinion on whether or not the project should be canceled.
I think we should cancel it, but I did hear from. Well, yeah, there are people that want to keep it in, but there
What does it do?
doesn't seem to be a
What
reason.
does it do, basically?
It just keeps it on the book, but nobody has,
Keep
seems
one
to,
on the budget.
the third leg of the Bennington, the which nobody says is gonna get done.
Right, and it also hinders any other projects from being developed because it holds it up.
Right.
We
In
went
case
on a
something
limb.
else
We
wanted
gave
to
them
be
every
done.
project they ever wanted. We went on a limb with everything that, the rest of
I'm
the bypass.
I'm in favor of removing that as well.
Yeah,
So how much did the project cost? What was it?
The original project, I don't know, it hasn't had a
Okay.
dollar figure in the book in years because we weren't gonna
So
build
they
it.
just want to keep it in the book as being there or something? Is that-
Yeah, Federal Highway has already canceled the project and,
Oh,
but
okay.
it needs to come out of the program before the community can do anything else with the right way that we purchased.
Okay,
And they
okay.
do want to do some things, but. maybe
I never
they're
knew
not aware of-
when we did that.
your understanding is the community wants it out, like,
Yeah, I mean, our understanding,
Yes. James
Yeah.
Brewer here, when
we
they
communicated with the
had to do
community
a lot
and
to make
they,
it happen.
they're done and they want to move on to other things.
right, and this is, the right of way is holding that up. So, yeah, I think we should remove it.
They got
We
everything.
should remove it.
And we discussed it with Senator Sears, and he said, of course, he protested if we should do what we want.
Okay, so in draft 2.1, you will, you will see an additional project
And I'm
being
sure he would
canceled.
support the community and their desire to,
He may not be aware of the full implications,
I
which
could
I
be.
shared with Representative Coker.
but he still persisted.
Nevertheless.
Did you just say there's gonna be additional language added to this?
To cancel the Bennington, yes.
That we haven't taken any other testimony on than just this discussion.
We talked about it before with the agency.
We did, and we said we would have some discussion with this idea.
We could talk to Senator Kansas.
Did you say this?
That's what I hear, I don't.
Yeah, so keep above the fold.
Senator Chittenden, it'll be highlighted in the next draft, so to the extent that you need like a reminder of the fact that maybe you want to keep it above or talk to someone else.
Just send a couple emails so I can say I sent a couple emails.
Senator Chittenden, recording the entire.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
It's like he's prepared, it's like he's prepared to.
Well, then we wouldn't want to have all that preparation go to waste.
Yeah, we get on TV, he'll do it. No doubt about that.
Oh, yeah, TV cameras are always there.
For the new kid on the block, he's doing well with TV coverage.
Okay, so I think you closed out section 7, the Transportation Alternatives Grant Program, that's letting it go up to 600,000 for the next 3 fiscal years. And then we got Central Garage Fund,
Make a comment on this?
I mean,
on Transportation Alternatives or Central Garage Fund. I'm just gonna open up the language.
Did we close this out before?
Central Garage,
It's gonna be 1.6.
May I say something?
Yeah.
So in my preparations this weekend and diving into this bill, there's just this one section on page 17. If you look at lines 6 through 9 on page 17, it's jarring to me. And so I have been working with Bradley Kuchenberger as well as others from V-Trans. And we have some language that I won't speak for Bradley, but it's an alternative to this. Let me just highlight. So this is line 6 through 9 on page 17. It's saying that the amount of equipment depreciation expense from the prior fiscal year or for equipment that is fully depreciated and still actively in service, an amount equal to the depreciation on that piece of equipment from the prior year. What I'm struggling with is I could interpret that as a fully depreciated asset on the books could then continually be used to shall be appropriated from the central garage fund in perpetuity without ever replacing that asset. And so I'm sure it's fine, but just the way this language reads to me, I was asking for alternatives. And I guess what the intent here is they just want to adjust for the supply chain inefficiencies to use this money for carryover. So I will, the last email that we'll be talking about today, or the last amendment.
Oh, I can just put it up there.
It's okay. It's just some alternative language to this. I'd love to know if the agency has changed their opinion, if they don't support this alternative. Okay, so I'm not saying you're good. So I would propose this to be, I would
So you
say,
think it's
more
clarity?
more aligned with generally accepted accounting principles with how I understand depreciation and use.
This takes money from the central garage fund.
Shall be appropriated in section
Number
2.
two.
Shall be appropriated.
So maybe I'm just not reading it correctly, but I'm just a citizen that got elected and I got to understand this, and the way it's worded right now, I'm just worried that the same asset could continually be used for the reappropriation depreciation.
So where's subsection little b in this?
So if you're in the amendment on page 17, the language the agency is proposing be codified is in subdivision 2B, line 7 to 9. It's
I understand, but the heading,
oh, okay.
it says each fiscal year.
So what is the purpose of subsection B? That's gonna be on page 16. And it's basically to acquire new or replacement equipment. So that's what the money that is being appropriated from the central garage fund can be used for. But Senator Chittenden's concern is that this is a permanent, well, it's giving them the ability to re-depreciate for purposes of this appropriation without actually requiring that they then go and purchase new equipment. And it is the agency's recommendation to codify something as a permanent approach to what is deemed to be what they think is a temporary problem, which is the fact that they are keeping equipment past its depreciated lifespan because of supply chain issues. So what Senator Chittenden's proposal does is it strikes out from what would be codified on page 17, lines 7 to 9, the or for equipment that is fully depreciated. And instead, and that's why you see the little semicolon highlighted on page 16 of his proposal, which I put up on the screen.
We got a handout.
And you have the handout. And instead, just having that third part for the calculation include the fully depreciated piece in fiscal years 2024 to 2026. So it's saying for these fiscal years, you're basically substituting what is in subdivision B codified for what they wanted to see codified. I don't think I explained that very well, but it is.
So the yellow highlighted would go in.
So it would be an entirely new section added. What you would be seeing is in the changes to codified law for the central garage fund, it would not be adding in anything about the depreciation of a fully depreciated asset. That would be taken out. It wouldn't be a change to codified. That's why there's the highlighted semicolon, because it's hard to show it's been taken out. But it's then saying that they can do the calculation that they wanted to do, appropriating based off of depreciation for the fully depreciated asset for these fiscal years. So, and I think that was worked out as a guess for when there might be supply chain issues. And I told Senator Chittenden and the agency, this is only 3 years. And Bradley said that they would flag it on their end. So if it turns out it's something that needs to continue past the 3 years, I am sure you will hear from the agency.
Isn't make or break for me. The language, I didn't like how it was. This seems to be to get to them to where they want to be, and it seems to make more sense. Limited.
Is this really real money that we're talking about here?
Yeah.
I mean, depreciation is kind of a theoretical. it's sort of like, well, I know, and so I was like,
Depreciation really is just an accounting tool.
I know.
My concern is you keep getting to use the same depreciated amount, but not that they would, but just if.
I mean, we have to follow generally acceptable accounting practices, and I don't know that that would be.
I wouldn't think so.
You know, I mean, I like it. It clears it up. It puts a time limit on doing something that you wouldn't
Let
normally.
it go. After all that work and time and effort and agreement, far be it me to say, let's not go with it.
Okay, so you're gonna go with Senator Chittendon's proposal?
And I'm sure you're gonna get a lot of questions about, are we really doing duplicate depreciation that is contrary to general accounting principles, but
I'm asking.
you're considering those
Yeah, I'm gonna ask. Not fully understanding what I'm asking.
I'm
gonna
looking at
ask
the
you.
Gatsby principle. So they pay for it.
Don't refer to the chair, okay?
I think the one sentence way to describe it is, this is a temporary solution to what is thought to be a temporary problem, not a permanent solution to what is thought to be a temporary.
But when
And
you're
don't ask me about
But
GAAP.
when you're appropriating of depreciation, I mean, you're. It's like.
I hope that your other lawn starts to grow a little bit, so you have time to go out and mow your lawn.
I'm glad you're saying it.
Okay, so the next batch of sections that you haven't closed out are sections 9 to 11. These are your public transit sections. These, I feel like it was a while now, more than a week ago, that you had testimony from Green Mountain Transit and from the agency. And the
I thought he did a good
concerns.
job. I thought he did a good job explaining other laws. He was here, talked about service.
So we added the urban.
So I don't know, but one thing I just want to flag before you get to language is what you do not see here is the reduction to highway maintenance, because this does not have that $1 million from highway maintenance going to Green Mountain Transit. Instead, you heard testimony from the agency that they had a way that they could find that money other places. I don't know if you closed out in agreement with that approach, but I'm just flagging for you the fact that you don't see a reduction in highway maintenance, because there isn't a reduction in highway maintenance and there isn't the corresponding increase in public transit. And then you can talk about coverage.
I thought we agreed that we were gonna do that, but I can't remember. I thought it was 500,000 that we thought they would have money in their reserve, or they would use money in the
So you'd have to
reserve.
come up with 150,000. Yeah.
So do we need to have all that language in here?
I don't think you need to have it in there because it's not changing around the authorization for public transit. And you heard testimony that they could use, I think, some of the MTI money for it. And again, it's not changing anything with the authorization for the $500,000. If you wanted to be prescriptive in your direction to the agency that they need to do what they said they were gonna do, this would be the place to do it. But if you are going to just say, we like that plan, it's consistent with the white book and you don't need anything in the T-bill to.
How much is the MTI? That's the only thing I was talking
So I couldn't remember if we got down to 250 or 150.
about. Yeah,
They would still have to apply
Yeah.
for, and he's eligible and all of that. So it's competitive, but they understand the risk there and they were accepting
I
it.
just don't want us to be, I don't want the agency to assume that we want this, that we're somehow putting our thumb on the scale in that competitiveness.
Yes, and we don't want that either. So,
But
And
then
nothing here says that you want that.
so that ties into Senator Chitten's concern about if that doesn't materialize, then we've really created kind of a fiscal hardship for the agency. We don't want to influence it. I'm going to come back to fees, which nobody likes, but when we have the fees, there may be some ability to accommodate that risk. And so that's still out there. So rather than, if we in fact would have the one-times to help fund that bridge rather than this redistributed model.
I think because Ross has a $49 million budget and they're,
You think the risk to?
I think the risk is
it's
very low,
minimal?
very
Okay.
minimal, and, he has the ability.
Now, Senator
because-
Mass has already got a rash, and Senator Chittenden is gonna get one, if he, thinks that his public transit entity is at risk of a financial loss.
What are we gonna get?
I know.
I don't know about you two, but I'm sure you'll get one before you're done.
You say, thumb on the scale, that's my department.
Yeah, right.
So-
There's two prongs to the concern though. One, that they might not get the money from MTI, but two, if they do get it, that's still 100 or 150 less for the MTI grant. So that's why I would love to find 100,000.
I mean, I guess it is only 150,000 less for an MTI grant that's not competitive, you know, because we only award competitive grants and, you know, based on the number of applicants we get, and sometimes it's below the amount that is available, and sometimes it's above. And if they are not competitive, we are going to have to find within our budget another way to backfill. So because they have committed to 250,000 from their reserves, and we've committed to finding the other 250, plus the 500 in
So they're not at
We've
risk.
got
for
it
the
covered
two-
either way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the only thing that they are committed to is the 250 that they've moved forward out of reserve. The other 250, however you
We're gonna
move
find
your money around, that's why we don't want to be prescriptive here, is on your dime, so to speak.
I mean, we all have to come back here next year and talk to you again, so we're not going to be, you know, we understand what the dilemma has been in both down here and upstairs in the house. This is a section that's received a lot of attention, so we understand that this is something that is going to have to be addressed, and we found the money, we did so that we didn't have to reduce the maintenance appropriation, and so this is the commitment we are making.
And last thing I'll say on this. So I think they originally wanted, there was conversation. Nobody said originally wanted 2.2 million for fare free. And they came back and they came down to give us $1 million to give us enough time to get to fare free. And now we're effectively cutting them down to 750,000. This is my concern. GMT, it needs money. They are financially, their model is not really sustainable. And what it could happen is it could be October, November, or December where they have to start cutting services. And then they also simultaneously have to put fares on some of the most vulnerable of our community and our state. And if that's going to come back to how are we going to fund them? And I just worry that 100,000 shortfall might be what doesn't get them to January. when we
But the
can come into the
100,000
budget adjustment.
I heard Michelle say is not something that they will be short. If the agency is committed to finding that 150 and the 100 for a total of 250.
Yeah.
So that what they've committed to of being on the hook is the 250 out of reserves to be the bridge until they get the fares implemented.
Yeah, and I think that part of their plan, which is in this language, is to make sure that the lower income people have a pathway forward to have reduced fare or free fare bus service, and so that's already articulated in here. The fact that they have a structural deficit and they may have to cut services is like a separate issue from this piece that we're dealing with here in terms of fare free. They had that same issue before the pandemic. And so this is kind of an ongoing thing that the board is needing to, you know, determine, like, they need to right size the system, and they're not maybe going to be able to serve all the people they previously served, which is the same case in other parts of the state.
I'm over time. It sounds like a soft commitment, not a hard commitment in the budget. And I just feel like we're
Well, she's on record.
putting our strongest, our most, our biggest public transportation system, we're putting them on even harder financial straits by not finding these resources. But it'll be what it'll be, and we'll see what happens. And
I think we found the resources. We found the $1 million to make this happen. What they told us they need, we found. 500,000 in federal, 250 from Green Mountain Transit, and 250 from the agency.
from the reserve, but the 250 from the agency, is that in this budget or is it
Yeah.
a soft commitment?
It's in the budget. We have a $49 million transit budget,
Yeah.
which is not like line by line. We have, I mean, you do get a presentation of what we anticipate the activities are going to be, but we have fungibility between different sections for different activities. So we have the ability to cover, because transit agencies are known for having crises of this sort. I'll just be honest.
And that's why you have that flexibility.
Yeah, that's why we keep flexibility because things come up. And sometimes, you know, in the past, we've had them go under all the way in a very short period of time. And so that's why I feel like we worked hard with GMT outside of this room to come up with something they could live with, according to their director, and something we could live with. And I assume the director ran it by the board. That's, you know, his responsibility, but so we, you know, we've closed the gap on the $1 million in funding that they were looking for.
Okay, last thing I'll say is I don't think we've solved the problem, and that's why we're asking to look at other funding sources, and I think we're gonna be talking about public transit next January as well.
Yes, that's, yeah,
That'll be
yeah.
Oh, yeah, talk about public transit. Yeah.
You're gonna be getting several reports on public transit next January. This is such a good segue. So,
It's a fact, they don't want to charge them. They'll do anything without charge. I think they have a plan, right?
so the 3 reports you're gonna be getting are in sections 9, 10, and 11. The first one you've seen generally before, but Green Mountain Transit made some proposed modifications based on testimony that you had. So the plan that they're supposed to be developing and implementing would now be just for their urban Green Mountain Transit routes. At a minimum, the plan to establish tiered fared service needs to do these things. There is a modification to the first one, which is incorporating a low-income transit program to provide certain passengers with service at no cost or reduced cost to the passenger, and that's to address the fact that there's still a collection of money, it's just not from the passenger. And then adding in another requirement that the plan that they're establishing needs to be designed based on reasonable revenue estimates to generate fair revenue at least 10% of projected operational costs on urban Green Mountain Transit routes. And then
Was that 10% what they used to do, or where that?
I don't know where it came from. I think it was what they said they were going to do, and then it was in the language that was sent to me. I don't know if Michelle has more information than that.
Was okay. I didn't know, yeah, that's for pre-pandemic, it's free to switch to fare free at 10% is what they gained. I don't know if you remember from your time there.
And then for purposes of what comes back to the General Assembly, making it clear that this isn't like something that you're approving of, they're just providing it to you, they're advising you of what they're planning on
So
doing.
this would be the fares that they would
Yeah.
would generate at least 10%. In other words, that they have to contribute something toward the operational costs.
And then it's still the interim draft.
We'll see how much cross subsidization goes on between passengers.
Interim draft still October 1st, and the final draft is still December 1st, but using the advise language.
Oh, we dropped the October 1st.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, I thought we did too.
So I can tell you that this is the language that I got from Green Mountain Transit. You certainly can take away their reporting requirements if you would like.
If they want to give us a draft, nobody's gonna read it, I don't think, but
You want to take out the interim one, and then if the House wants it, they can put it back in.
they could say an interim draft, you know, completed on October 1st, and if somebody wants to see it, they can say, hey, can I see the draft? They don't have to submit it, but that's, like I said, a tiny point.
They would be yeah,
I mean, in October, I don't know.
they would be submitting it to you, wouldn't they first? You'd be looking at that
Yeah, we would be looking at it,
right along. It's
Right
probably
along.
an iterative process.
exactly.
I mean, for us to do anything on to report to committees, I thought we
In October.
jettisoned that.
I thought we did too.
So to say Green Mountain Transit shall advise the House and Senate committees on transportation of its plan to establish tiered fared service through a final report.
Yeah, I think that's-
A final version of the plan to establish tiered fared service.
Just something to talk about. In the comments.
So section 10, some modifications. The biggest one being that it is the Vermont Public Transportation Association that would be providing the report on the non-federal match. and the shift from local match, using the phrase local match to non-federal match, that was originated, I believe, with the agency in consultation with other entities, and then changes that originated with this committee was that it would be one or more funding sources, so not limiting it to just a funding source, using that non-federal match
Rather
phrasing
than local.
rather than local, pushing back the reporting date, I think it was previously December 15th, and then removing the sentence that required consideration of that prior specific specified report, which I know was something that Senator Chittenden had raised. Section 10. Okay, section 11, all new language. This came from the agency. It would require the agency to consult with the Agency of Human Services, Vermont Public Transportation Association, and then the agency is on the hook to conduct a benefit and risk assessment of the current systems for delivering public transit and non-emergency medical transportation services within Vermont, and that's known as the graded services model. The assessment needs to also include a review of other public transit service approaches that are used in the United States and make recommendations on modifications to how Vermont is managing its statewide mobility service design so that it can be as efficient, robust, and resilient as possible. And the written assessment, not a supplemental report, but just the written assessment that they need to do, needs to be filed with the House and Senate Committees on Transportation, House Committee on Human Services, and Senate Committee on Health and
Well, I
Welfare.
think the one thing that I suggested we put in, and that was to make sure we're maximizing our federal benefits to support public transit. And that is why I'm putting it in, because Medicaid is one of the biggest federal sources here, and it's not within Agency of Transportation. You're consulting, but I think I had suggested that we make it clear we want to maximize those federal sources to support our public transit system. And it was very deliberate because of those federal Medicaid dollars that are so crucial to, I think it's $15 million into the system. So if they wanted to say, we're going to pull up and contract with, another entity, which has been proposed in the past, it has a very detrimental impact on your public transit system. So I
know that there's something, do we need to modify anything?
Well, I think we need to, yes, assessment for a system.
Maybe it's as efficient, robust, and resilient as possible, and to the extent practicable, fully maximize federal
I wouldn't
funding
even
sources.
say as practical.
And as
just
resilient as possible,
fully
and fully
just
maximize.
fully maximize federal funding.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key here is, as Senator Kitchell pointed out, the elderly, disabled, Medicaid funding, those elements really are what make transit providers able to do the rest of the public transit work. And the agency's FTA funding for capital for buses and vehicles is what is used, for delivering these Medicaid services. And so if they were to become separated, both entities would have a hard time making the mission work.
So that was the only thing that we talked about.
Yeah.
It didn't get added here, but we're now adding it.
Okay, so you'll see that in the next version. Okay, section 12 you closed out. This is just splitting the MTI and the Vermont piece. And then you had all of the language on the vehicle incentive programs, and I have that you closed them out fully, except for section 17, which is going to include Senator Pursuit's proposal on the safety piece for e-bikes. But now you also have your proposal from the discussion that you had yesterday about the tweaks to the Electrify Your Fleet program. I don't know if Michelle or Patrick.
Is that in the repeal section?
No, it would, so the repeals you were fine with, that's getting rid of the session law.
Okay, but you have it in yellow, but.
Oh, that's just because the section number changed.
Oh, okay, that's all.
Yeah. So you closed out 13, you closed out 14. I can tell you that the editors will have a Can to May change that you'll see later. you closed out 13 is the long one.
Section 13, those are all session law repeals.
Closed out 14.
It's the incentive programs.
Yep, that's all, the three main ones getting codified. Section 15, you closed out, that's the ability for the money to be carried forward and used for the codified programs. Section 16,
What page are we on?
36.
36.
So section 16 you closed out, but you then heard testimony about how there should be some modifications to it. I don't know if you want to hear and see that language now, or if you want to wait. If Chris has responded, I don't know if he has while I was sitting up here, or if you want to wait for Community Rights Vermont to have a chance to look at the language. It's been edited. I'm happy to share it to you. I think Mike's posted it and printed it.
Let's say we wait on 16 so we can just confirm on the language. It'd be more efficient than going over it.
And then they find out that it's changed or something.
So do you have an easy way with your tools available to you to just take all the language that's being repealed from session law and compare it to the language that we are now qualifying statute to just confirm or not what's the differences?
Not really. What I do have is in the section by section summary document, a comparison of it, not doing a side by side, so you can see this has changed in this place, but I have summarized all of the changes divided out in categories. So if you look at Appendix A of the section by section summary,
In this section by section summary, do we have, this is as introduced, we have another one, right?
Yeah. So I think you might not have it printed, but it is posted to your website. Appendix A has not changed because there were no changes to it. But if you look at Appendix A, you will see it says, so for example, type of law, current law, it's in session law. This is what it is. It's going to be in codified law for purposes of how has things changed with the definitions. They were included in session law, they're codified. For purposes of the reporting requirements. Previously it was included in session law, required on an annual basis. This is now saying, that it's included in session law.
Let me tell you, people will be glazed over by the time you get that. Because it's so technical in terms of, but you can hand that out to people, so you can just, they can.
I think this Appendix A is the easiest way to see the differences in how the programs are changing, because it's going to highlight things for you, like the fact that in existing law, the vehicle price cap, it's $40,000 or less base MSRP, but now it's going to be benchmarked to $50,000 or less.
Passed out, so when you present the bill.
Yeah, if you wanted to pass out the whole section by section summary, you could. If you wanted to pass out just Appendix A, you could. I can tell you that I prepared a side-by-side that showed this is session law and this is codified law for the House when they first started working on this. I can update it, but it was barely used because it wasn't useful. And because things are moving, it's not like I'm comparing an apple that the House likes to an apple that the Senate likes, and you've made some small changes to the apple. It's moving everything around. It's taking 4 years of amendments to session law that was done in like an iterative way, where there was a tweak here and a tweak there, and that's why so much is being repealed. So the starting point is just me having taken all the session law and combined it together into one document, and then comparing that to something that's structured totally different. So
Last question, what you just said there, do you have that just with all of these things that are being repealed in a document?
Yes.
I'd love to see that.
yes, that I can easily send
That would be
you.
great.
Yeah.
Okay. Just everything in section 13, that's already collected somewhere.
What you gonna do with that?
I want to read it and just overlay that with what I'm seeing in the other sections.
I can tell you
I'll
that
tell you more of it, I just don't feel like saying it on YouTube. Is that fair? YouTube.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? This is the building evacuation. Gather your belongings if they are within reach. If evacuate the building using the designated route or area, the closest stairwell or exit. Assemble in your designated area and check in with your fire and life safety report.
Required to have two.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? This is the building evacuation. Gather your belongings if they are within reach. Evacuate the building using the designated route or area, the closest stairwell or exit. Assemble in your designated area and check in with your fire and life safety report. May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? This is the building evacuation. Gather your belongings if they are within reach. Evacuate